You can have you.
Main event of the evening.
Ready to race to you.
These days are Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, we are discussing the 5th episode of Season 2 of The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, Double Jeopardy.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Double Jeopardy.
In 19th century Siam, a woman named Shazal broods over 2 cats over the upcoming coronation of her stepdaughter Princess Tuptu.
Tomorrow she will be 16, and by law, become ruler of all Siam.
And swears to make the girl disappear. Her Peter Lorre-esque assistant, Batlam, tells her everything is ready as she planned it. While Tuptu is sailing on a boat, her doppelganger, Cupcake, is about to land the time machine. Once again, not in 1957 Milwaukee.
Well, we're within a century or 2.
That's good enough for me. Pull over and I'll walk the rest of the way.
On the bright side, the gang is happy to have shown up at a celebration instead of, almost getting murdered immediately. Cupcake tries to zap the gang into more period-appropriate outfits, but she's the only one happy with hers. Batlam sends his henchmen after Princess Tuptu.
And make sure you take very good care of her.
Shazal gloats to her stepdaughter about her plans to become queen, and then Tuptu runs away, followed by the henchmen. The gang is in the marketplace, looking at fruit, when Cupcake hears someone calling for help.
Someone please, help!
She goes to see what the problem is, and the henchmen, upon seeing her, believe her to be the princess. They corner her on a dock, and her attempt to zap herself out of trouble does not help.
There's the princess! Have her!
A princess? Where? You mean me? Hey, you're making a mistake!
Tuptu runs into the gang, and begs for help, right as Shazal shows up. Fonzie hides her in a big jar, and stalls Shazal. She orders her henchmen after them, and Fonzie trips them all.
How dare you refuse the great Shazal?
That was real easy, I just did.
She vows that the next time they meet, Fonzie won't be so lucky. The gang all think Tuptu is Cupcake, but Fonzie believes her when she says she's the princess. Tuptu notes that Cupcake may have been captured and brought to the palace already. Fonzie and Mr. Cool go to rescue her, while Richie and Ralph take Tuptu to the time machine, Ralph flirting all the while.
You're just gonna love the time machine, princess. You know, royalty was my first career choice. What's the pay like anyway, huh?
In a prison cell in the palace, Cupcake laments that she's come down with a cold and it's ruining her magic. Shazal and Batlam come to gloat, despite Cupcake's protestations that she's not the princess. When she sneezes and creates a pink floating elephant, Batlam notes that the princess could never do that before.
Well, if you're not Tuptu, where is she?
Well, that's for us to know and you to find out.
Fonzie and Mr. Cool enter to rescue her, which Fonzie does by opening the bars on the window so the 3 of them can jump out. Ralph is showing Tuptu around the time machine and pretending to know more than he does.
And this princess is the whatchamacallit.
What does it do?
It moves the thingamajigs.
As Cupcake, Fonzie, and Mr. Cool run up to the time machine, followed by henchmen, Ralph grabs one of the controls, and the machine vanishes. While Shazal and her henchmen menace Fonzie, Cupcake, and Mr. Cool, Ralph tries to get the time machine back on track. They land somewhere full of snow, and when the door opens, a Yeti hand grabs Richie.
I do not think this is Siam.
I think she's right!
The princess having disappeared, Shazal is delighted. Now all she has to do is feed the remaining time travelers to the crocodiles. She also calls Fonzie Mr. Fonzarelli. Dunno how she knows that.
My thoughts exactly, Mr. Fonzarelli.
Back on the time machine, Ralph shuts his eyes and pushes buttons at random. To his and Richie's delight, they land in Milwaukee, right outside Arnold's. Tuptu is confused.
Milwaukee? Please, what is a Milwaukee?
It's cheeseburgers and drive-in movies and cheerleaders.
And Richie realizes they can't stay. They got to Milwaukee once, they can get to it again.
We did it before and we can do it again.
He takes the controls so they can go find Fonzie. No mention of Cupcake or Mr. Cool, but I guess they're included implicitly.
I want you to have absolute confidence in me. Trust me implicitly.
They land in Siam and sneak into the palace. Ralph screws it up when he's spooked by a dragon statue and runs into a symbol. Discovered by the henchmen, the 3 of them are thrown into the crocodile pit with their friends. Cupcake and Tuptu greet each other.
You must be Cupcake. And you must be Tuptu.
And Fonzie manages to mess with the gears that control the opening of the pit, sealing the crocodiles underground. Shazal and her henchmen confront them as they escape, so Tuptu leads them through the palace. Outside, they get onto a boat, which a no longer congested Cupcake zaps into a swamp buggy. Unfortunately, she also zapped Batlam's boat into a speedboat.
Shazam! What magic!
Fonzie manages to outmaneuver them, and Bashalam's boat crashes into the palace. Shazal has one last trick up her sleeve, a Bodhisattva statue that turns out to be an automaton that she sticks on the gang. Fonzie just tosses it into the water. Fonzie then uses a vine as a makeshift lasso and ties up the queen, which Mr. Cool then does to her cats as well.
Hey, now there's a puppy after my own heart.
Right, Lindsay.
You cutie.
Thank you, Peter. That was Double Jeopardy. It first aired back on October 17th, 1981. The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang was followed by the Richie Rich Scooby-Doo Show. This week, Scooby and his buddies attend a punk rock concert where they encounter an alien who looks like Scrappy. CBS aired some classic Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner cartoons, and NBC had a brand new episode of The Smurfs. This week, a villain called Bombast kidnaps Smurfette and Clumsy. He then plans to exhibit them in a sideshow. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I really want to see how Scooby-Doo is going to handle punk rock, because on the one hand, the Scooby-Doo franchise started out as a more sympathetic, if thoroughly neutered version of late 60s, early 70s counterculture. So I could see them being broadly sympathetic, but still kind of goofy about punk rock. Or I could see them going full Quincy, punk rock is evil, and it makes you evil.
Locking herself in a room listening to that violence-oriented punk rock music. You've got to see it with your own eyes to believe it, Quince.
Either way, I'm very curious.
I definitely want to see the punk rock episode of the Richie Rich Scooby-Doo Show, but I'm also curious about this Bombast on the Smurfs.
Smurfs! Incredible! The world will pay a fortune to see such tiny creatures.
So I may have to switch back and forth between the two channels. Double Jeopardy was directed by Ray Patterson, George Gordon, and Rudy Zamora. It was written by Joan Brooker and Alexandra Stoddard. Joan was a successful TV writer in the 80s and 90s, but this was her only credit in animation. She wrote for some Happy Days adjacent series, including Joni Loves Chachi and Charles in Charge. Her other credits include The Love Boat, Designing Women, MacGyver, Full House, and Hi, Honey, I'm Home. She later got into making documentaries. Her credits there include Larry Flint, The Right to be Left Alone, and The Loud Ladies of South Fork. She's now known as Joan Brooker Marks and teaches at the School of Visual Arts. Alexandra Stoddard is an actress and writer from LaGrange, Illinois. She was Joan Brooker's writing partner for a while in the 1980s. They worked together on The Love Boat and Harper Valley PTA, as well as this series. She's better known as a TV actress. She guested on MASH and Makin' It. Her animation voice credits include The Smurfs, Foofer, and Pride of the X-Men, where she played Dazzler.
Hold it, Kitty. Wolverine may not be Mr. Sunshine, but he isn't your enemy.
As for guest stars this week, I want to point out Mitzi McCall as Shazal.
Top two. I cannot trust Bashalam to do anything.
Mitzi was a comedian and actress from Pittsburgh who is most famous for being half of a comedy team with her husband Charlie Brill.
My little girl is waiting outside, you know. She used to be one of the Beatles.
Well, what happened?
Somebody stepped on her.
In addition to touring, Mitzi and Charlie made frequent appearances on variety shows and talk shows in the 1960s and 70s. Mitzi's other TV credits include
Seinfeld, Maude, Chuck, Hannah Montana, Dharma and Greg, and Caroline in the City.
She's also in a few movies, including Ron Howard's Ed TV. Mitzi has an extensive voice acting resume, including
Hey Arnold, The Wild Thornberrys, Regular Show, Cow and Chicken, Duckman, and numerous Flintstones and Scooby-Doo spinoffs at Hanna-Barbera.
We heard her last season as Electra 6000 in May the Farce Be With You. Mitzi died just a few months ago in August 2024 at the age of 93. Peter, what did you think of Mitzi McCall as Shazal?
It is a great, very dramatic, very imperious performance, fitting for a would-be queen. I will add that I am glad that nobody tried for an accent in this. Much like with a lot of the female villains on this show, she gets to be menacing and dramatic and scheming. It's a lot of fun. And kudos to her for being one of very few female villains who does not want to jump Fonzie's bones. She is focused on the task at hand, and the task at hand is murdering her 16-year-old stepdaughter.
Shazal is definitely keeping her eyes on the prize. She does not get distracted by Arthur Fonzarelli in this episode. So good for you, Shazal. As for some cultural and historical references this week, the legal term double jeopardy refers to being prosecuted twice for the same offense. We are protected against this by the Fifth Amendment.
Well, doesn't that make you feel dandy?
This story takes place in Siam in the year 1853. Thailand was known as Siam until 1939, when the Southeast Asian country switched from a monarchy to a military dictatorship. In the 1850s, the country was led by King Mongkut, whose goal was to modernize Siam by embracing Western innovations. In fact, the famous novel Anna and the King of Siam by Margaret Langdon was a semi-fictional account of this era.
You do not look like a scientific person for teaching of school. How old shall you be?
I am 150 years old, Your Majesty.
Now, Peter, I will admit I am not familiar with Siam's history at all. What I know of it comes from The King and I, the musical adaptation. How about you?
Pretty much the same. I am also woefully unfamiliar with Thai history. I feel like this episode is also woefully unfamiliar with Thai history. Much like with the Musketeers episode, we focus on a made-up stand-in for the then monarchy that has nothing to do with the actual one. And I will also note that the name Princess Tuptu is definitely a reference to Tuptim, a supporting character from The King and I, a rebellious, enslaved Burmese woman.
Tell the king what useful thing can you do?
I can read, Your Majesty.
Chazal has two unnamed Siamese cats. The Siamese is one of the first distinctly Asian breeds of cat and is native to the country we know today as Thailand. In addition to their distinct colors caused by a form of albinism, Siamese cats are noted for their triangular heads, large ears, blue eyes, and elongated, slender bodies. Now, Peter, are you a cat person at all?
I would like to be. My family is a dog family. We've only ever had dogs. My mother is allergic, so we kind of can't be a cat family.
What did you think of the Siamese cats in this episode?
They were nicely imposing. They are not anthropomorphized at all compared to Mr. Cool. They don't really do much throughout the episode, except be kind of mean to Mr. Cool, which is pretty par for the course when it comes to evil animal sidekicks on this show. I will note that as I was watching the episode, I was thinking, oh god, is this going to be a reference to the cats from Lady and the Tramp? But thankfully, it did not seem to be the case.
I rewatched that scene from Lady and the Tramp just this morning in preparation for this episode.
We are Siamese, if you please.
I think that what really weirds me out about that song is that Hilary Duff and Haley Duff covered it in the 2000s for one of the Disney Mania cover albums.
We are Siamese, if you please. We are Siamese, if you don't please.
Which is wild. Why would you make those girls do that? What is wrong with you?
Chazal is Princess Tuptu's wicked stepmother. The wicked stepmother is a stock character in fables and fairy tales around the world.
Are you her mommy? And she said, Mommy, where's the drama in that? I'm her wicked stepmommy.
But there might be a historical precedent dating back to ancient Rome, Livia Drusilla, who ascended to power in 44 BC after the assassination of Julius Caesar.
I remember hearing that vaguely. Yeah, the wicked stepmother. When it comes to wicked stepmothers, many of the stories that featured them originally featured just straightforward evil mothers in oral folklore, and a lot of the people writing them down, like the Brothers Grimm, would eventually try to soften them by making them evil stepmothers instead, because I guess that's less disturbing than your biological mother hating you.
The character Abat Lam
Everything is in readiness, Chazal.
is based on Peter Lorre, the Slovakian-born theater and film actor who was a Hollywood mainstay from the 1930s to the 1960s and a frequent inspiration for cartoon characters.
I haven't seen such a beautiful bubble since I was a child.
Though Lorre was not Asian, he was ethnically ambiguous and was occasionally cast as Asian characters such as Mr. Moto.
To recognize one's faults requires intelligence. To admit them requires courage.
I remember hearing secondhand from someone that the reason why he showed up in so many Warner Brothers cartoons was because he'd been blacklisted during the McCarthy era. For the Warner Brothers cartoonists, putting him in the cartoons was their way of keeping his memory, if not his career, alive. But I can't actually find anything to back that up, so I think it's just made up. I wish it was true, though, because it would be amazing if it was. It probably is just a case of he's a fun guy to draw and or do an impression of. I'm going to give the show the benefit of the doubt and say that that is why Batlam is Peter Lorre and not because of the times that Peter Lorre was cast in Yellowface.
Richie is briefly grabbed by a Yeti, or abominable snowman, a mythical creature said to inhabit the Himalayan mountains. This mountain range stretches across 6 Asian countries, including Nepal and China, but Siam is not one of them.
I do remember hearing something about Jimmy Stewart smuggling a supposed Yeti hand out of Tibet or Nepal, I believe. I have no idea if it's true or not, but if it is, that's kind of a jerk thing, stealing another country's artifact.
As they leave Milwaukee, Ralph laments,
Blue suede shoes, hot rods, a neck cello.
Blue Suede Shoes is the name of a classic rockabilly song written and recorded by Carl Perkins in late 1955.
You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoes.
Though the song is often associated with Elvis Presley, it was Perkins who actually had the big hit with it. Because they were so easily damaged, suede shoes were only moderately popular until the song gave them a major boost. The song was actually meant to make fun of suede shoes, but in fact made them more popular.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
A hot rod is typically a classic car that has been modified with a more powerful engine and often a flashier appearance.
My pappy said, son, you're going to drive me to drinking if you don't stop driving that hot rod Lincoln.
Some hot rods are made for illegal street racing, while others are just for showing off. Either way, hot rodding was a major part of the car culture that flourished in the 1950s and 60s. Ralph was the only major character on Happy Days who actually drove a hot rod. And I can imagine if I were Ralph stuck on that time machine, I would be missing that car too. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a pretty cool car. Back in the days when Ralph was the coolest kid in school and not, Ralph.
And Annette Funicello, we've discussed several times before. She's the singer and actress from Utica, New York, who rose to stardom as an adolescent on the TV show The Mickey Mouse Club in the 1950s and went on to success in film, particularly the Beach Party series. We've talked about Annette many times. I think it's because she's really on that Mount Rushmore of 1950s nostalgia.
There are basically 2 forms of 50s nostalgia. There's the 50s nostalgia that focuses on the parts that have aged well, and then there's the 50s nostalgia that is pure kitsch. And no disrespect to Funicello, but I think she's on the kitsch one.
Fonzie refers to Chazelle as the Wicked Witch of the East.
Oh, give me a break. Looks like that Wicked Witch of the East has found us again.
This is a character introduced and killed off in L. Frank Baum's classic children's novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz from 1900. In the original book, she is in league with the Wicked Witch of the West, but the 2 women are not sisters.
Who killed my sister? Who killed the Witch of the East?
The author gave his readers a little more information about her in his 1908 book, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, including how the witch came to rule over the Munchkins.
The Wicked Witch of the East is a major character in the book and the musical adaptation Wicked. Her name is Nessa Rose. She's Elphaba, the future Wicked Witch of the West's younger sister. In the book, she is born without arms, and in the musical, she is a wheelchair user. And in the book, she becomes this religious fanatic. In the musical, she ends up hooking up with a Munchkin named Bach, who is actually in love with Glinda.
Is all that going to be in the movie?
Probably, yeah. Well, movies, since for some reason Wicked is going to be a 2-parter.
Oh, are they seriously Kill Billing it? All right. Richie refers to their boat as a swamp buggy.
A swamp buggy! She did it!
What he means is an airboat. This is a flat-bottomed watercraft with a large fan-like propeller in back. These vehicles are often used in swampy areas and are also called plain boats, swamp boats, fan boats, or bayou boats.
The boat on the bayou floats right by you.
A swamp buggy is a land vehicle. Fonzie says to Richie, "Ye of little faith, Red."
But we'll crash for sure, Bonds!
Ye of little faith, Red.
This is a biblical reference. Specifically, it comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 8, verse 26. Jesus says this to his disciples when they panic during a storm. His version goes, "Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith?" He then instantly calms the storm. And Fonzie says, "Reach out and grab somebody else," in a sing-song voice.
Hey, reach out and grab somebody else, will you?
This is a reference to a long-running ad campaign for AT&T Long Distance. The telephone company used the slogan, "Reach out and touch someone," in its ads of the 1970s and 80s. They eventually turned it into a jingle.
Reach out and touch someone. Reach out, call up and just say hi.
I'm not sure if that jingle would have been known to Fonzie, but it definitely would have been known to the audience for this show because those commercials were on all the time. Do people even know that slogan anymore, or is that something that has been completely lost to history?
I did not, so based on my very subjective experience, it has been lost to history.
It was no great loss, Peter. Other observations this week. This is one of the rare episodes that does not start with the heroes aboard the time machine. Again, I am always grateful for these deviations from the formula. The match cut from Top 2 to Cupcake was also a nice touch. I feel that at this point in the series, we don't need to establish them on the time machine every single time because we're already used to it, and I think it's better to start somewhere else.
Yeah.
I was stunned that they found 1957 Milwaukee in this episode, and I really wanted them to at least walk around a little. They don't, but we do get to see that famous parking lot for a few seconds. Peter, did you anticipate that they were going to find 1957 Milwaukee in this episode, or did that surprise you?
It surprised me, yeah. I liked the fact that this gave Richie a character moment. It gave him a moment to say, yeah, it's great that we found it, but we've still got to rescue our friends, mostly Fonzie, and if we found Milwaukee once, we can find it again. I think that there is a definite tendency for Fonzie to overshadow all the other characters, so I was glad that we got to have a moment for one of the others.
We get another Perfectamundo from Fonzie this week.
Perfectamundo!
And an Exactamundo, too, so 2 Amundos.
I haven't said a mundo in a long time.
And Fonzie literally says to Cupcake, 1 out of 24 adventures ain't bad.
Not bad, Cuppies. 1 out of 24 adventures ain't bad.
Since this series ran 24 episodes, I'm guessing Fonzie's line was self-aware. Do you think that's what the 24 Adventures thing was about?
Yeah, I think it definitely was.
Maybe they knew this was the last season when they were making it? Some things that Cupcake says this week.
Jumping gyroscopes, leaping light years, leaping leptons, cosmic comets twice, terrible time warps, moon craters twice, and perilous plutons.
I think jumping gyroscopes probably was my favorite because it's one she hasn't used. Here are the times when Mr. Cool makes things better. He accidentally discovers the mechanism that operates the sliding floor, and he also manages to tie up the Siamese cats at the end, though I'm not sure they posed any real threat, and the other people don't seem to care about whether the cats are captured or not.
Mr. Cool seems roughly to have human intelligence, but the cats are just cats.
As for times when Mr. Cool makes things worse, again, none. But here were the times when Mr. Cool suffers physically and mentally. Richie lands on him. The time machine door closes in his face. Ralph stands on his foot. He's knocked over by the Siamese cats and becomes very dizzy. He is very nearly eaten by crocodiles, and a stone panel falls on him. So Mr. Cool is definitely a traumatized dog.
We haven't got time for this, Cool.
Right, Fonzie. Sorry.
It's all right.
Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Double Jeopardy?
I was interested by the outfits that Richie and Ralph very briefly wore. As mentioned in the summary, Cupcake zaps herself and the two of them into 19th century Siamese outfits, although I think theirs are the slightly redrawn harem outfits from the Ancient Arabia episode. Cupcake is the only one who gets an outfit that looks like actually accurate to the time and era, probably because she needs to be mistaken for the princess.
Siamese royalty in the 1800s really did dress like Cupcake and Tuptu dress in this episode, so those outfits were not far-fetched or implausible. Were there any other observations you wanted to make about Double Jeopardy?
I guess Cupcake has been Asian this entire time?
I guess so, or maybe by the 25th century such distinctions are now meaningless because everybody's just sort of one big ethnicity.
He's a beautiful mixed-up tomorrow person.
Maybe. That's one of those things that comes up, I think, in a lot of stuff said in the future, but I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. It's not just that she specifically has to be a dead ringer for this 19th century Siamese girl.
Tuptu didn't seem particularly Asian either, so I don't know what to say about that, other than I think, sort of like Peter Lorre, Cupcake is ethnically ambiguous and can pass for any ethnicity. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question, was this episode any good?
This was a pretty fun one. There are some things that I wish had gotten more screen time, but you've also got good stuff like Richie deciding not to stay in 1957 Milwaukee without the rest of their friends. You've got a very fun female villain who, for once, is not swayed by Fonzie's charms. You've also got a weird little cul-de-sac where Cupcake claims that she's developed a cold and that's affecting her powers. Although, given what her powers have been consistently like, I don't think you needed that to say that her powers are screwed up.
I wondered if the cold subplot was to give Didi Khan a chance to do another voice so that Cupcake and Tuptu would sound a little bit different for at least part of the episode.
That's a good point, yeah.
I thought this episode was very entertaining, and it was nowhere near as cringy as I thought it could be, seeing that it's set in Siam. I thought they could have gone way worse with it, and they have, if we remember the Fu Manchu episode from season 1. And the most interesting part of the episode is the part where they reach 1957 Milwaukee, when a show is in its second season and is very formulaic. If you can give me a scene that I was completely not anticipating, then congratulations, you've managed to surprise me. I'm going to chalk up the success of that to Joan Brooker and Alexandra Stoddard. Nice writing, ladies.
Yes, and proud we are of all of them.
So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow me on Blue Sky at petervolfranc.bsky.social.
They can follow me on Blue Sky at joeblevins.bsky.social. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com, and they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket next time we talk?
Next time, the gang face off against an evil Viking sorceress in Fjords and Sorcery.
I am so looking forward to this episode that I can't even tell you. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Me, Cathy's live most everywhere from Zanzibar to Berkeley Square, but Patty's only seen the sights a girl can see from Brooklyn Heights. What a crazy pair, but they're cousins, identical cousins, all the way. One pair of matching bookends, different hairs night and day.
We did it before and we can do it again.